Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Amanda Blackburn. Amanda Grace Byers Blackburn was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. She began her education in Indianapolis, Indiana, but her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. In Elkhart, Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006. She then continued her education and graduated with an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida in 2008. Amanda grew up in a family with strong religious beliefs. Her father was the lead pastor at the First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. From a young age, she was taught about Christianity and the importance of God's Word. Amanda was well-versed in the church's religious traditions, sermons, and psalms, and she always respected these values. While many other young people were eager to experience adult life, attend parties, and fall in love, Amanda had a love for Jesus and a desire to serve Him. God also loved Amanda because He created her as an angel, a blonde, slim girl with a bright smile, kind and sincere. Not only is Amanda beautiful, but her soul and heart are also very pure. Her every action shows love for those around her. When she was a teenager, Amanda vowed to remain pure and not kiss any man until marriage. She always kept that promise. However, her heart was deeply moved when she met her true and only love, Davey Blackburn, a boy from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a Christian family with strong faith. Davey and Amanda first met on a blind date at a concert by the Christian band Hawk Nelson, organized by Amanda's sister and Davey's best friend. At that time, they were studying at different universities, but every vacation, they spent time together. It was a pure and innocent love, not dominated by worldly desires. Davey and Amanda often went for walks together, shared their innermost thoughts and favorite quotes from church books. They always found joy in the little things and loved to joke with each other sincerely. Before returning to school, they held a fake milkshake drinking contest, and Amanda lost. Davey jokingly called her Milk Girl. When he looked at Amanda, he realized that she was the girl he wanted to marry. Amanda and Davey had a long-distance relationship. They kept in touch via text messages and phone calls, spending hours talking to each other. Every vacation, they spent time together. They took their relationship so seriously that they even sought counseling from a psychologist to learn how to communicate better. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davey got married. After the wedding, Davey shared with friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he felt a special connection between them, and he believed it was part of God's plan for them. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car parked outside a house on Sunnyfield Court. Davey was returning from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car, but a phone call kept him in the car for a few minutes. After ending the call, he leisurely got out of the car and walked into the house. When he opened the door, he froze and his gym bag fell from his hands. His wife was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davey was confused and in shock. He ran to his wife, did a preliminary check, took her pulse, and urgently called the emergency number. Amanda appeared to be alive. In the living room where the tragedy occurred, everything was in disarray. Furniture was scattered everywhere, and her purse was empty. On the second floor of the house, her child was crying. Emergency services arrived at the house 8 minutes later. The area was cordoned off. The house was packed with police and investigators. She was taken to the hospital. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially confirmed dead, Davey released an official statement, saying that Amanda had dedicated her life to loving and serving those around her. Amanda had made it her mission to help more people come to know Jesus as their personal savior. Davey believed that through Amanda's death and legacy, more people would find faith in Christ. He affirmed that they would continue the work they had begun in Indianapolis. Davey expressed his strong belief that God was good, that their tragedy was turning into victory, and that the best was yet to come. The murder of Amanda shocked not only the Orthodox family but the entire state. People demanded that the perpetrators of the murders of Amanda and her unborn child be found and punished. In his first interview, Davey described how he found his wife, Amanda, severely injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was only partially dressed, with her underwear lying nearby, face down in a pool of blood. Davey said he left the house around 6 a.m. to exercise and left the door unlocked. "I always do that. I leave without locking the door," he told investigators. It is unclear whether the criminals would have stopped if Davey had locked the door. However, locking the door would have made it more difficult for them to enter, giving Amanda more time to call for help. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and Amanda was shot 3 times, including once in the head. In the days following the incident, police had not arrested the perpetrator. They quickly ruled out the possibility that Davey, Amanda's husband, was involved in the horrific attack. The police have taken a statement from Scott Floyd, an Indianapolis Fire Department paramedic. Scott was the first to arrive at the scene after Davey called 911. When he arrived, he found Davey standing at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands. Scott noted that Davey appeared calm and did not seem to understand what had happened to Amanda. Davey told Scott that Amanda was lying on the floor and that he could not wake her up. Davey said that he got home from the gym at 7:30 a.m. and called his friend Kenneth Wagner while he was in the driveway. He ended the call and entered the house at 8:10 a.m., where he found Amanda lying face down on the floor. Thinking that Amanda was sick or unconscious, he called 911 at 8:22 a.m., 12 minutes after discovering her. That is a long time in an emergency. Davey repeatedly stated he thought there was a problem with the pregnancy, suspecting Amanda had become dizzy and fallen. However, it was suspicious that after 12 minutes, he did not notice a brain mass about 5 feet from her body. Emergency room physician Scott Floyd determined that Amanda's head had clotted, suggesting that the shooting may have occurred several hours before she was taken to the hospital. However, this information was not officially released. When questioned, Davey said that after calling 911, he contacted his father. Defense attorneys did not question Davey further. Authorities verified Davey's account through surveillance cameras at the gym and ruled him out as a suspect. An autopsy performed on November 12 showed that Amanda had been shot 3 times, once in the back of the head, once in the left arm, and once through the upper back. She also had several scratches on her left cheek, a laceration to her lip, and a missing lower tooth. These injuries suggested that a struggle may have occurred between Amanda and her attacker. The investigation was extensive, including reviewing security cameras from nearby streets and interviewing neighbors and family acquaintances. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davey left the house. Reginald Townsell, another neighbor, commented that their neighborhood did not typically experience shootings and that the Blackburns did not deserve this. The community was shocked by the incident, as they considered the Blackburns to be good and likable people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the loss of her bank cards and MacBook bag, police initially thought it might have been a robbery. After the murder of Amanda, on the morning of November 10, 2015, the police received multiple emergency calls reporting a series of break-ins near Blackburn's home, which occurred at approximately 5:20 a.m. One victim, a woman, woke up to find her mobile phone, laptop, wallet, keys, and car missing. The sliding glass door to her flat was open. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at her home on Sunnyfield Court. The break-in happened when the burglars smashed the glass door of her porch to gain entry. According to the police report, several valuables were taken, including 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding. Indianapolis Police Lieutenant Richard stated they were investigating the connection between the murder and other burglaries that occurred in the area that morning. To maintain the confidentiality of the investigation, the police are not releasing many details. However, after collecting images of the suspects from one of the homes that were broken into, they released the images and asked for the public's help in identifying and providing information. Davey is confident in the police's efforts to catch the perpetrators of his wife's murder. Investigators said they have been given unprecedented powers of investigation. They hope promising leads will soon help identify the perpetrators. The main clues used to track down the suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and ATM receipts. Receipts and a sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used in the robbery. On November 11th, police impounded a vehicle near Blackburn's home. The receipts in the car had a debit card number that matched Amanda's stolen card. After obtaining a search warrant, investigators viewed ATM camera video, which showed the driver wearing a stolen pink beanie to cover his face. Police identified the suspects through three primary methods: DNA testing, surveillance cameras, and witness statements. DNA testing from a sweater confirmed Jaylen Watson as one of the suspects. The identification of Jaylen was a critical first step in the investigation, according to the report. Police obtained cell phone records for Jaylen and his friend, Diana Gordon. Jaylen's records were available because he had been paroled after a previous burglary conviction. These records showed that their phones were in the area where the crimes occurred. Additionally, phone records indicated that Diana and Jaylen were near the Chase Bank on the day of the murder, where Amanda's debit card was used. To complete the investigation, police reviewed surveillance footage in the area and identified Larry Taylor's phone number, which led to his address. Taylor was the final link in the case. In the following days, a gun was reported found near the Blackburn family home. According to police, a man gave the gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have found it outside Amanda's home. The gun was later analyzed by forensic experts. After 2 weeks of investigation and working with detectives, police charged Larry Taylor, 18, and Jaylen Watson, 21, with the murder of Amanda. A third burglary suspect, Diana Gordon, 24, was arrested for violating her parole but was not charged with a felony because she did not enter the Blackburn home. During questioning, Larry admitted to shooting the victim twice because she jumped on him and he was afraid of being scratched. After the victim fell, Larry shot her again in the back of the head and watched as she bled to death. The crime occurred when the three criminals broke into the Blackburn family home to rob money. They took advantage of the fact that Davey had left the door unlocked before going to exercise. Once inside, they prevented Amanda from approaching by threatening her with a gun, and Larry even fired at her. Jaylen and Diana, witnessing the tense situation with Amanda, decided to leave. They had obtained bank cards from a previous robbery and went to an ATM to withdraw money. Initially, they failed to withdraw $500 from one machine, but then succeeded in withdrawing $1,400 from another. This was when the security camera captured their images. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Larry. During their absence, a fight broke out in the house. Amanda woke up after being beaten and fought back against her attacker, who was assaulting another woman. Larry then placed the stolen credit cards in the car of an accomplice, who used the cards at an ATM at the time of the incident. Upon their return, Larry admitted to shooting Amanda. According to court records, Larry, Jaylen, and Diana committed 3 burglaries on November 10th, with the Blackburn home being the third target. In the first incident, they entered a home while the homeowner was sleeping and stole a laptop, a wallet, and a car. Despite discovering security cameras, they left without difficulty. In the second incident, they broke in through a porch window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater. The sweater later helped police identify the group. The report outlines the evidence police gathered against the suspects based on court documents. The most crucial piece of evidence was Jaylen's DNA on the pink sweater, used in the second burglary and later to cover his face when he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda's bank card. Jaylen and Diana cooperated with the investigation in exchange for reduced sentences. Larry waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary but claimed he was too confused to remember specifics. The district attorney filed formal charges. Larry faced 13 counts, including the attempted murder of Amanda Blackburn. Jaylen was charged with a felony. Both Larry and Jaylen faced multiple counts of burglary and robbery. Diana, in custody for a parole violation, was also charged with burglary. A fourth person who knew about the robberies and burglaries but did not participate was interviewed and released. The Indianapolis Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit, along with the gang unit and the FBI, worked to arrest Larry. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the suspect's arrest. Detectives worked tirelessly to investigate homicides in the city. With the assistance of Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and District Attorney Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors considered additional charges related to the fetus. Though the victim's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, there was no evidence to support a rape charge. Larry's first trial in December 2021 was dismissed after a juror leaked information to other jurors. The trial was rescheduled for October 2022 with a more rigorous jury selection process. Over 100 jury candidates filled out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate their ability to render fair verdicts. Larry was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda and related burglary charges. Co-defendants Diana and Jaylen pleaded guilty, testified against Larry, and received sentences of 20 to 35 years. Jaylen and Larry are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. Under Indiana law, penalties for murder range from 45 to 60 years, with the possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty in some cases. Prosecutors have requested that Larry be given an additional 20 years in prison because Amanda was pregnant at the time of her murder. Davey, the victim's husband and a pastor, expressed relief that the perpetrator was caught and could no longer harm others. The case has shocked many, including state leaders. Amanda's funeral was held at a Catholic church with more than 2,000 people in attendance, including Governor Mike Pence. The local church has set up a fundraising page to help with Amanda's funeral and medical expenses. Davey expressed hope that the justice system will wisely deal with those who have caused great pain to his family. Surprisingly, he has repeatedly said he forgives his wife's killers. Davey told the press, "I felt relieved when I heard about the arrest. Although I wanted to hate, feel anger, and despair, I chose the path of forgiveness, tolerance, and hope." Amanda's case has attracted widespread attention, being reported in many media outlets both domestically and internationally. After his wife's death, Davey transformed from the role of a grieving husband to a popular blogger. He created a series of podcasts and videos called Nothing Wasted, discussing his experience. Davey appeared regularly on television, talking about his wife's death and the pain he had gone through. However, his behavior was not typical of a grieving person. The tragedy seemed to bring Davey both fame and fortune. The fact that he received insurance money after his wife's death has raised questions about whether forgetting to lock the door on November 10, 2015, was really an accident. On March 2, 2016, Davey bought a spacious new home with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a pool. He also sold the house where his late wife Amanda was murdered. Despite his recent loss, Davey was quite optimistic. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog with the caption, I'm excited to have a pool party at my new home. Today, Davey is remarried and happily so. He shared, everything makes sense. I feel blessed. When I focus on Jesus and look at his wonderful face, everything mundane becomes small in the light of his glory and goodness. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Williams. Michelle was raised in Hurst, a suburb of Dallas, Texas, alongside her younger sister Laura. After their mother left to pursue a better life, their father took on the responsibility of raising them. However, he struggled to provide for the family, often relying on unstable construction work and seeking solace in alcohol. In an attempt to make ends meet, Michelle's father devised and carried out schemes to obtain easy money. He would take jobs at factories, intentionally injure himself, and collect insurance payouts. Although this tactic initially worked, it was eventually exposed with the help of CCTV cameras at one of his workplaces, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. Growing up in an environment filled with deception and manipulation, Michelle became accustomed to a life of dishonesty. She desperately sought escape from this reality, but the lies and deceit had become ingrained in her way of life, making it difficult for her to imagine an alternative. Michelle longed to grow up quickly and leave her impoverished life behind. By the age of 15, she had developed into an attractive young woman, drawing attention from both her peers and older individuals. Michelle soon discovers that she can use her femininity and charm to influence the men around her and get what she wants. As a result, she enters a series of romantic relationships with various men. At 17, Michelle drops out of school and marries 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien, telling him she's pregnant. Kenneth takes responsibility for his young wife and unborn child, joining the army to provide for them. They move frequently, having 2 more children, but Michelle grows dissatisfied with their nomadic lifestyle and temporary military housing. After 5 years, Michelle leaves Kenneth, citing his infidelity and physical abuse as reasons for the divorce. She returns to her hometown of Hurst, portraying herself as a victim of domestic violence to garner support from relatives and friends. As Michelle rebuilds her life, she reconnects with an old classmate, Brandon, and falls in love. Brandon is smitten with Michelle and happily accepts her 3 children from her previous marriage. They were preparing to get married, but just before the wedding, Brandon became furious with Michelle. He discovered that she had not finalized her divorce from her first husband. Michelle had been afraid to discuss the divorce with her ex-husband due to his abusive behavior, and as a result, she hadn't sent the necessary documents. With the help of a lawyer, they quickly resolved the issue, and they was able to get married in 1994. Initially, their family life was peaceful and routine. Brandon focused on growing his IT company, while Michelle worked as a dental assistant. However, Michelle had bigger aspirations. She began bringing home various dental equipment and supplies. Brandon's concerns grew as he suspected something was wrong. It was later revealed that Michelle had been stealing. Fortunately, they avoided going to trial. However, this incident marked the beginning of Brandon's trust issues with his wife. When neighbors reported that cars frequently visited their house while Brandon was at work, he installed a tape recorder in several rooms. Upon listening to the recordings, he discovered that various men were visiting their home throughout the day. Brandon conducted his own investigation and discovered that Michelle's first marriage ended in divorce due to her repeated infidelities, contradicting her claim that it was her husband's abuse. Upon learning this, Brandon reached his limit and requested a divorce. Enraged that Brandon was the one to initiate the split, Michelle sought revenge while he was away at work. Brandon had a valuable saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish. Michelle destroyed it by pouring Comet into the tank, killing all the fish. But that was not the end of her destructive behavior. Brandon's dog, Domino, was also a victim of Michelle's cruelty. She gave the dog sleeping pills, which led to its death. However, this was only the beginning of Brandon's nightmare. Michelle's actions continued to cause harm, and Brandon eventually learned the truth about her when his marriage was ruined. What Michelle did to Brandon was not an isolated incident. Her treatment of other men was even more shocking. It was later discovered that Michelle's first child was the child of her and John Paul Ray, a high school classmate of hers. Instead of telling John the truth, Michelle convinces Kenneth O'Brien that the child is his and he is forced to marry her. For 13 years, Kenneth believed the child was his child and even paid child support from age 5 to 18. After Michelle's divorce from Brandon, she moved in with John, the father of her first child. They lived together in a common-law marriage for 8 years. However, their relationship ended abruptly when John suspected Michelle of cheating on him. Michelle confirmed she was having an affair, which led to John moving out and leaving most of her belongings behind. She then met Greg Williams, a man with a history of marital failures, having been married twice before and having a daughter named Taylor from his previous marriage to Katie. After Greg and Katie's divorce in 2003, they shared custody of Taylor and maintained a good relationship, which made a formal child support agreement unnecessary. Greg was a successful and generous man who seemed like a perfect partner for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle had a daughter named Michaela, and they got married a year later. Their marriage seemed like the epitome of the American dream, with plenty of money, children, and love. Michelle appeared to have finally achieved the life she had always wanted. Greg came from a family with strong principles and had achieved success through his own hard work from a young age. He was a sports enthusiast and a black belt in martial arts. Both Greg and Michelle owned guns, which they kept in their home in Keller. Michelle kept a silver .40 caliber pistol in a safe, while Greg stored his black LAA .45 caliber gun, always loaded, in a case under his bedside table. Despite their differences, they was committed to making their marriage work. They regularly hosted birthday parties for their children from previous relationships at their home in Keller. Michelle's adult children frequently hosted barbecues and pool parties at their home, which was always filled with friends. Despite their idyllic suburban life and bright daughter, Michelle and her husband Greg didn't fit the traditional American couple mold. They had met through an online forum for those interested in bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, and their raucous adult gatherings had drawn numerous complaints from their neighbors. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call was made by a frantic woman, claiming she and her husband had been attacked by an intruder. She reported being injured and her husband shot. Police quickly arrived at the scene, discovered a blaring television and a baby sleeping on the couch inside the house. Michelle's daughter was fast asleep and unharmed during the incident. However, Michelle's behavior raised suspicions among the police officers who arrived at the scene. Despite claiming to have just experienced a burglary and assault, Michelle appeared remarkably calm and composed. Her hair was styled, and she was fully dressed, which seemed inconsistent with her story. The police soon cordoned off the entire gated community and thoroughly searched the home. As the investigation progressed, Michelle was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for further questioning. Over several hours of interrogation, her account of the events began to unravel. Michelle initially claimed that an intruder, dressed in black, had struck her on the head with a wrench. She alleged that she fell to the ground but remained conscious and heard a gunshot. According to her, the intruder then fled through the back door. However, the evidence at the scene contradicted her story. Greg Williams, the victim, was found shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber handgun and a wrench were discovered near the back door, but the circumstances suggested that Michelle's account was not entirely credible. The investigation found no fingerprints on the weapons and no signs of forced entry. The family's valuables, including a large sum of cash, were left untouched. Security footage revealed that the only car to enter the gated community before the crime belonged to a newspaper delivery person. Michelle attempted to mislead the police by fabricating a story about the attack. She even went so far as to injure herself with a wrench and stage the scene. However, detectives noticed inconsistencies in her account. The discovery of the gun used in the crime, devoid of fingerprints, further raised suspicions. The final discrepancy was the untouched $20,000 in cash, which Michelle couldn't explain. While Michelle was unable to provide a reason for why her husband, a successful businessman and devoted father, would take his own life, she was able to justify her own actions. Michelle claimed she wanted to protect their young daughter from the painful truth about her father's death. She told the police that she had cleaned the gun and washed her husband Greg's hands to remove fingerprints, and then staged a fake home invasion before calling for help. This explanation seemed strange, but it explained why no evidence of an intruder was found. Michelle also admitted to using bleach to clean up the crime scene and hitting herself in the face with a wrench to make the attack look more believable. From the start, the police in Keller suspected that Michelle's story was not true, but at the time, they did not have any physical evidence that linked her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for lying to the police, but she was later released. Around 5 p.m. on the day of her husband's murder, Michelle visited her sister Laura's home. During the evening, Michelle cried occasionally, but her sister felt that Michelle's tears seemed insincere. Notably, Michelle didn't mention her late husband's name once. The next morning, when questioned by police, Michelle appeared to be in a great mood. She was well-dressed, had styled her hair, and was wearing makeup. Despite the ongoing investigation into her husband's death, Michelle went out for breakfast at a popular restaurant. As investigators struggled to find a motive and credible evidence, Michelle inadvertently provided them with both. During her initial interrogation, Michelle claimed she wasn't interested in money. However, her actions after Greg's death told a different story. She quickly began selling off assets from their family businesses and spending large sums of money. Michelle had been cashing checks through her husband Greg's IT company, but the exact amount is unknown. It is likely that the amount was substantial. After selling the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made a crucial mistake. She attempted to claim the payout on Greg's life insurance policy, for which she was the sole beneficiary. The policy was taken out on August 12, 2011, nearly 2 months before Greg's death. However, Michelle overlooked a key detail: the policy did not cover Greg's death since he had taken his own life. As a result, the insurance company denied her the $60,000 payout, which was the primary motive for the crime. Later, another financial irregularity came to light that raised suspicions about Michelle. It was discovered that she had used falsified financial documents to secure a mortgage loan for the house that she and Greg were planning to buy before his death. The account numbers had been intentionally altered, and the lender did not immediately detect the elaborate scheme. Following Greg's death, Michelle canceled a meeting with the mortgage company, and the fake account went undiscussed until it caught the attention of the police. Despite the scrutiny, Michelle felt confident in her ability to avoid consequences and wrote a check for $188,000 to attorney Kenneth Wincorn. She then took a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. During a 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police uncovered a web of deceit spun by his wife, Michelle. An autopsy revealed that Greg was shot from a distance of 12 to 18 inches. A toxicology report also showed that Greg had a large amount of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Further investigation found no evidence of a break-in or assault on the house. Instead, police determined that Michelle had sedated her husband, turned up the TV volume, and shot him from close range. Their daughter was asleep in her room and did not hear the shooting. On November 3, 2011, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner officially ruled Greg's death a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9 while on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing a false statement to police. As the sole witness and suspect, Michelle's bail was set at $522,000. However, she spent only a week in custody before being released on a reduced bail of $85,000. Michelle walked out of jail wearing gym clothes and a GPS monitor, accompanied by her new attorney, Kenneth Wincorn. However, this news infuriated Kathy, Greg's first wife, as she had paid Wincorn with money from Greg's estate, which she believed should not be used to defend Michelle, who was accused of killing Greg. According to online court records, Kenneth Wincorn's law firm had handled Greg and his ex-wife Kathy's divorce in 2003, and his name appeared on documents related to the custody agreement for their daughter Taylor in 2008. However, Wincorn later provided evidence showing his company, rather than him personally, had handled Greg's divorce case, which cleared him of the accusations that he had colluded with Michelle. Kenneth Wincorn learned of Greg's murder from an IT company employee. He described the news as shocking. Later, Michelle sought his help after her attempt to profit from Greg's death failed. Michelle changed her name to Shelley and presented herself as a fitness guru on Facebook. She publicly revealed her relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her oldest son who is nearly 15 years younger than her. Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and actively promoted it online. Michelle spent the next few months attending court hearings, enjoying her new relationship, and participating in fitness classes while wearing a GPS tracking ankle bracelet. Her courtroom attire often included miniskirts, knee-length boots, and revealing blouses. According to Greg's ex-wife Kathy, Michelle never showed any signs of mourning Greg's death. Rob Conover, a friend of Greg's for over 20 years, attended many of Michelle's hearings. He observed how Michelle skillfully manipulated police officers, portraying herself as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle took a plea deal, pleading guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. Michelle Williams has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for tampering with evidence and engaging in deadly, dangerous conduct. This is a third-degree felony that is only recognized in a few states. Initially, Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and her husband Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. The trial of Michelle Williams, also known as Keller's Black Widow, has begun. Prosecutors allege that she intentionally targeted her husband in 2011 to collect on his substantial life insurance policy. They described the crime as a clearly planned scheme motivated by greed. According to prosecutors, Michelle drugged her husband with sleeping pills and then shot him in the head to collect the insurance payout. Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. In a statement, Michelle's attorney, Kenneth Wincorn, highlighted the challenges in the case due to the thoroughly cleaned crime scene. If the jury finds that Michelle tampered with evidence and cleaned up the crime scene, she could receive a life sentence. During the trial, prosecutors stated that in the hours preceding the violent death, Greg Williams had a heated argument with his wife over financial issues. The altercation escalated to the point where he slapped her for spending a significant amount of money intended for a house down payment. In contrast, Michelle Williams' defense team claimed that Greg Williams took his own life. Defense attorney Clay Graham added that Greg Williams frequently struggled with depression and was known to use sedatives and steroids regularly. Michelle Williams' husband, Greg, was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Michelle stated that she attempted to cover up the incident to shield her 4-year-old daughter from the truth. Throughout the court hearings, Michelle maintained a composed appearance but showed some emotional response when presented with photographs of her deceased husband. Michelle planned to blame Greg's ex-wife for the crime, claiming it was due to custody disputes. However, this plan was flawed as there were no actual disputes. Michelle's adult son testified against her, revealing she had asked him to assist in framing Greg's ex-wife. After many hours of deliberation, the jury found Michelle guilty of tampering with physical evidence, a felony offense. She received a harsh sentence, 60 years in prison, with the stipulation that she must serve at least 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Michelle has not expressed remorse for her actions and continues to evade full responsibility for her crimes. She is currently serving her time at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Callie Ann Poulton. Callie Ann Poulton was born on September 20, 1989, in Rochester, New York. As an only child, she received all the love and attention from her parents. However, when Callie turned 3, her parents decided to divorce, and she stayed with her mother, Judy. Despite the divorce, Callie's father maintained a good relationship with Judy and regularly visited his daughter. After the divorce, Judy moved to a quiet suburban apartment complex in Rochester. Although Callie's father helped with childcare, Judy faced financial difficulties. To make ends meet, she took on a part-time job delivering magazines to her neighbors. Her goal was to save enough money to take Callie on a trip to Disney World the following summer. On the evening of May 23, 1994, Judy was preparing for her delivery shift. She was at home, inserting leaflets into the magazines, when Callie asked to go for a walk. It was an evening, and Callie wanted to ride her tricycle. Judy checked outside and saw other children playing in the yard, so she allowed Callie to go out for a short time, instructing her to stay within the yard. Callie ran outside with her tricycle, and Judy planned to finish preparing the magazines and then take Callie to McDonald's after completing her delivery route. Judy stepped outside with the magazines, intending to call out to her daughter Callie, but Callie was nowhere to be seen. Judy looked around the yard, called out her daughter's name, but there was no response. She searched the yard and then the surrounding complex grounds, but Callie was gone. Usually, when Callie rode her tricycle, the creaking of its wheels was noticeable, but now there was silence. As Judy's panic grew, she began to cry out for her daughter, drawing the attention of the neighbors. They joined her in searching for Callie, but no one had seen Callie. The complex was heavily wooded, and a fence separated the houses from the nearby highway, making it unlikely that Callie could have wandered off on her own. Judy knew that Callie was only allowed to ride her tricycle in their yard, and Callie had always obeyed her mother before. It was also unlikely that Callie could have gone far on her small bike without being seen. With each passing minute, Judy's fears grew, and she decided to call the police. The officers arrived quickly and began a thorough search of the complex. As the search continued, officers went door to door, asking if anyone had seen Callie. Police suspected that Callie was still in the complex, and they believed the suspect was likely a resident of the complex. It would have been difficult for an outsider to get inside, kidnap Callie, and drive away without being noticed. To assist in the search, residents of the 300-apartment complex voluntarily allowed police to enter their homes. In case there was no one in the house, the complex manager used the spare key to search. Unfortunately, searching each apartment yielded no results. Callie and her bike were not found. After an all-night search, the case was reclassified as a kidnapping at around 4 a.m. A specialist unit took over the case, and detectives questioned Judy about possible enemies. They asked Judy if Callie's father was involved, but Judy ruled this out and said he had no motive. Detectives also asked if Judy had noticed anyone suspicious among the residents. She mentioned Mark, a 22-year-old man who had just moved in with his wife and young son. Judy noticed Mark's behavior was unusual. Judy and Mark spoke briefly a few times, and during one conversation, Mark commented that Callie was beautiful. Although Judy had heard similar comments from others, Mark's tone made her uncomfortable. What really caught her attention, however, was when Mark added that he had spied on all the little girls in the complex and that Callie was the most beautiful. Judy became increasingly wary of Mark after their conversations, and she made an effort to limit her interactions with him. Even though they still occasionally crossed paths in the yard. One conversation in particular raised her suspicions. Mark asked Judy if Callie would tell Judy if someone tried to touch her. Judy found this question alarming and quickly ended the conversation. As a result, she no longer allowed Callie to play with Mark's son, even when she was present. During her conversation with detectives, Judy recalled a detail that had previously seemed insignificant. When she was searching for Callie, she had asked Mark if he had seen Callie, and he claimed he did. Judy also noticed that Mark's sneakers were missing their laces, but at the time, she was too worried about Callie to think much of it. The detectives brought Mark in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in Callie's disappearance. He even agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. However, Judy's own account provided Mark with an alibi, as she had seen him on the playground with his son at the time she was searching for Callie. The police also searched Mark's apartment but found no sign of Callie or her bicycle. As a result, Mark was no longer considered a suspect, and the investigation continued without any leads. The police investigation into Callie's disappearance began by questioning her mother, Judy, as a standard procedure. Judy cooperated fully, answering all their questions, but she found it distressing that the police were focusing so much on her when they had no other leads. As the search for Callie continued, the case received widespread attention, with news reports, billboards, and flyers throughout the city. The police received over 1,000 of tips, but unfortunately, each one led to a dead end, and the case remained unsolved for months. Despite the lack of progress, Judy remained hopeful that her daughter would be found alive. She quit her job to devote all her time to the search, printing and posting flyers, contacting media outlets, and working tirelessly to keep the case in the public eye. With the help of some compassionate supporters, she was able to raise $100,000 as a reward for any useful information. Judy's efforts led to national television coverage, including appearances on The Oprah Winfrey Show and a popular TV show about unsolved crimes. Judy also partnered with local businesses to distribute flyers in their offices, establishments, and on commercial vehicles. She even convinced 2 airlines to include the flyers in ticket envelopes. Although these efforts generated new leads, the police were unable to make any significant progress in solving the case. The turning point in the case occurred when a woman called the police on August 9, 1996 to report a serious argument with her husband. She was tired of his strange behavior and wanted a divorce. In an attempt to persuade her to stay, the husband confessed to a shocking crime. he had killed Callie. The woman was stunned and immediately called 911 and revealed her husband's identity to the police. The husband's name is none other than Mark Christie, Judy's neighbor. However, the detectives faced a significant obstacle. Under state law, any information shared between spouses was protected and inadmissible in court. This meant that even if Mark's confession was true, the police couldn't use it as evidence to arrest or question him. Furthermore, Mark had been in his yard with his child shortly after Callie's disappearance, and his apartment had been searched early in the investigation, making it unlikely that he had the opportunity to kidnap and kill her. The detective in charge of the case, Detective Crow, decided to talk to Mark after hearing his wife's story. Mark and his family had moved out of the complex just weeks after Callie went missing due to serious allegations. Mark had been accused by the two girls' parents of standing naked in front of his house, which made the detective suspicious. Although no investigation had been launched, the incident appeared to be suspicious. Crow traveled to Mark's new home, 50 miles from Rochester, but encountered resistance. Mark's mother opened the door and said her son would not talk to the police without an attorney present. Mark learned about his wife calling the police and contacted a lawyer. This meant that the police could not use Mark's confession to his wife as evidence, and his lawyer could prevent any questioning. Despite this, Crow persisted. While talking to Mark's mother, Mark appeared and Crow persuaded him to answer some questions about Callie's case. Crow suggested they discuss the matter over coffee at a nearby restaurant. Mark agreed to Crow's surprise, but only on the condition that Crow would then take him to see his lawyer. Crow and Mark stopped at a nearby Italian restaurant. Crow tried to engage in the conversation normally, avoiding any pressure or tense questions. This approach seemed to work as Mark began to open up more while they waited for their food. Mark expressed deep remorse for his actions towards Callie and explained that her image had haunted him for the past 2 years, constantly appearing on news reports and flyers. Crow tried not to scare Mark. Crow had spoken to Mark before in the early stages of the investigation. But this new conversation felt different. Crow believed that Mark was feeling proud of having avoided capture, so Crow decided to appeal to Mark's ego. Crow told Mark that Mark was actually smarter than the entire investigation team, and Mark responded by saying that he didn't want to sound boastful, but his method of handling the bike was actually very smart. Mark offered to share details about how he got rid of the bike, but only on the condition that Mark wouldn't discuss anything else. Crow maintained a friendly and non-threatening tone, reassuring Mark that he was in control of the conversation and could share as much or as little as he wanted. Mark said that Callie's tricycle had been in his apartment 3 days after she went missing. Mark knew that the police would probably search every apartment without a warrant when a child was in danger, but Mark found a loophole in the law. Although police could search for a missing child, they were not allowed to search for physical evidence. This meant they could only test spaces that were large enough for a child to fit. To hide the bike, Mark decided to disassemble it and hide the bike's parts in small and hard-to-reach areas of his apartment. He wrapped some parts in clothes and put them in the closet, and put other parts in small bags and took them out to the car. He then dumped the pieces in various locations far from home. Meanwhile, the police were stationed at the exit of the complex, checking each car, but since they were only looking for Callie, the small bags containing the bike parts did not arouse any suspicions. Detective Crow saw an opportunity to get a full confession from Mark. Crow took a sympathetic approach, suggesting that Callie's death may have been an accident and not Mark's fault. Mark asked about the sentence he could face, and Crow estimated it could be about 25 years. Mark felt this was unfair, as it meant he had to spend half his life in prison and away from his family. He also mentioned that he had lived with guilt for 2 years, implying that this should be taken into account when sentencing. Despite Mark's questionable logic, Crow continued to encourage Mark to confess, suggesting it would bring him relief. Mark agreed to tell the truth, but only after consulting with a lawyer. Crow knew that Mark's lawyer would advise Mark against confessing to a crime without solid evidence. So, Crow decided to be straightforward with Mark, explaining that if he didn't tell the truth, Callie's parents would never know what happened to their daughter. Mark responded by saying that Callie hadn't suffered. Crow senses that Mark was confessing and encourages him to do the right thing. Mark looked at Crow and finally admitted to his actions. He repeated that Callie hadn't suffered and Mark confessed to strangling her with his bare hands. He then added that he hadn't done anything else to her. Mark recounted the events of that evening, explaining that Callie had come to his apartment and asked to play with his 1.5-year-old son. Mark let her in and took her bike to the kitchen. Aware that Callie's mother wouldn't approve of her visiting, Mark let Callie go upstairs to play with the child without drawing Judy's attention to the situation. However, when Mark heard Judy calling out for her daughter in the yard about 10 minutes later, he panicked. He knew that Judy would be furious if she discovered that he had let Callie into his house without permission. In a moment of desperation, Mark went upstairs to the children's room and strangled Callie with his bare hands. Detective Crow was skeptical about certain aspects of Mark's story from the start. It seemed more plausible that Mark had lured Callie into his apartment under false pretenses, taking advantage of his wife's absence at work. Once inside, Mark might have attempted to molest Callie, but when he heard Judy calling out for her daughter, he may have panicked and killed Callie to avoid being exposed. Crow recalled that Judy had seen Mark wearing sneakers without laces, which suggested that he had used them to strangle Callie. This detail implied premeditation, contradicting Mark's claim that the crime was spontaneous. To avoid raising Mark's suspicions, Crow decided to continue listening to his story. Mark claimed that after the murder, he left Callie's body in the kitchen and took his son outside to establish an alibi. He deliberately allowed Judy to see him in the playground, hoping to deflect any suspicion. Once Judy began searching the complex, Mark returned home and hid Callie's body in a laundry basket, covering it with clothes. A short time later, he placed the basket in the trunk of his car. Mark confessed that the chaos of the search, with many people looking for Judy's daughter, allowed him to carry out these actions unnoticed. Mark took his son and drove to the building where he worked as a security guard. He parked near the back, left the basket with Callie's body by the door, and then entered the building through the main entrance, telling his co-workers he had forgotten something at work. His toll didn't raise any suspicions. So he made his way to the back door, which he opened from the inside, and retrieved the basket. Mark then climbed onto a large tank containing liquid coolant, opened the top, and dropped Callie's body into it after tying a heavy metal object to her. He got rid of Callie's clothes but left her earrings on. After disposing of the body, Mark returned home and joined the neighbors in searching for Callie. By doing so, he had already removed the body from the complex before the police became involved, and no one suspected anything. At the end of his confession, Mark expressed regret for killing Callie, stating it was a mistake. Crow paid for their food, and Mark left a $2 tip before willingly going with Crow to the police station, where he was arrested for murder. When Mark's lawyer found out about the confession, he attempted to retract it, but the attempt was unsuccessful. This was because Mark had provided the information willingly, and Detective Crow had followed proper procedures. As a result, the police went to Mark's workplace, opened the tank, and made a gruesome discovery. Even after 2 years, the victim's body was still inside. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, experts were unable to determine the cause of death or gather any further information. They confirmed the identity of the remains, which was none other than Callie. Mark admitted his guilt to the judge and received a minimum 25-year prison sentence, just as Detective Crow had predicted. Although Mark's lawyer managed to have the kidnapping charges dropped, he was still convicted of murder. However, Mark's case took a surprising turn in 2010. The police reopened a 1988 case involving the brutal murder of 74-year-old Viola Manville, who was killed while walking in a Rochester suburb. At the time, Mark was just 16 years old and was considered a suspect, but he passed a polygraph test, showing no signs of deception. As a result, another man, Frank Sterling, was arrested and eventually confessed to the crime after a lengthy overnight interrogation. Years later, Frank tried to appeal his sentence, claiming that the police had coerced his confession and that he was disoriented by the end of the interrogation. However, his appeals were unsuccessful until 2010, when the case was reopened and new evidence was sent to the lab. DNA analysis revealed the suspect's DNA matched not Frank's, but Mark Christie's. Mark, 39 at the time, admitted to murdering Viola in 2011 and received an additional 28 years in prison. Despite his confession, he showed no remorse and never revealed his motives for the crime. Meanwhile, Frank was finally released from prison after 19 years of wrongful imprisonment. He went on to sue the authorities and was awarded nearly $10 million in 2014. However, his life was cut short when he died of a heart attack in 2017 at the age of 54. Mark is currently serving his sentence in prison, but he may be eligible for parole in the near future. It's unclear whether he will be released, and his case serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigations. If the investigators had not mistakenly focused on Frank and coerced a false confession, Mark might have been caught earlier and possibly prevented from committing another crime, the murder of Callie. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shelby Erin Vaughn Holt. Shelby Erin Vaughn Holt was born on September 7, 2000, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, United States. She was the second of 5 children in her family, which included her mother, Shauna Hartman, father Toby Vaughn Holt, older sister Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings Davin Vaughn Holt and Isaac Vaughn Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018 and then spent 2 years trying different jobs, including working at a steakhouse, as she searched for her ideal career. She seems interested in pursuing a career in the therapeutic field, but has not yet made a final decision on her area of expertise. At 20 years old, Shelby was living life to the fullest. Her cheerful personality made her a beloved presence at social gatherings, and she loved to dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Besides, Shelby is active on Facebook, where she frequently shares photos of happy moments, many of which feature her young niece Camilla, who is the daughter of Peyton's sister. According to her mother, Shelby met Valerie Rose Hardick, a 22-year-old woman, on Facebook. Little is known about Valerie's life, but rumors suggest she had a difficult childhood, was involved with questionable people, and may have struggled with mental health issues. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., Shelby called 911 and reported being injured. She stated that Valerie had shot her. Shortly after the call, police officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at Shelby's residence. Upon entering the house, they found Shelby severely injured, barely conscious, and she suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. A large pool of blood surrounded her. While one officer stayed with Shelby to provide assistance, the others searched the house to ensure no one else was injured and that the shooter was not still inside. While waiting for the ambulance local to arrive, the officers on the scene provided first aid to Shelby. A surgeon asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her, and she identified the perpetrator as Valerie. Emergency medical personnel soon took over Shelby's care, transporting her to a nearby hospital. She was in critical condition but remained conscious and alive. Shelby's family was notified of the incident, and the Fort Wayne Police Department began collecting evidence from her home. A key piece of evidence was discovered on a doorbell camera, which allowed authorities to identify a suspect after reviewing the footage. Police are appealing to the public for any information relating to the case. The following day, an unusual incident occurred in Ohio, about 50 kilometers away. Local police received calls about a suspicious woman lingering around a gas station convenience store around 10:30 in the morning. Eyewitnesses reported that the woman had been inside the store and around the gas pumps for about an hour, seemingly trying to see the credit card numbers of customers as they made their purchases. Police received a call from a man who reported encountering the woman at the convenience store. According the woman had pointed a gun at his back. Following this report, police officers arrived at the gas station with caution, where they found the woman still present. She was arrested without any violent incidents occurring. The woman, identified as 22 years old Valerie Rose Hardick, was found to be in possession of a 9mm handgun that matched the one used in the assault on Shelby. Shelby's previous statement identifying her attacker as Valerie, coupled with this new evidence, further solidifies that Valerie was the perpetrator. Furthermore, Valerie's car matched the one captured by House Shelby's doorbell camera, which was seen leaving the scene moments before Shelby made her emergency call. Valerie was arrested and taken to the county correctional facility, where she awaited her court hearing, despite the ongoing investigation. At the same time, Shelby was fighting for her life after being shot with a 9mm gun. Shelby suffered severe injuries to her chest and abdomen. To help her recover, doctors put her in a medically induced coma and did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, 3 days after the violent attack on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body could not recover from the injuries, and she passed away. According to Shelby's mother, her daughter died after undergoing 4 complex surgeries on her abdomen that were unsuccessful. Shelby also received 20 blood transfusions, but her medical outlook was always poor. Even if she had survived, doctors believed that Shelby would have needed to have her legs amputated. Many questions remain about what motivated Valerie, a 22-year-old woman, to kill Shelby in such a brutal manner. Investigators suggested that jealousy was the motive. It was alleged that Shelby was in a relationship with a man to whom Valerie had strong feelings. Valerie was arrested and charged with 2 separate crimes: criminal assault and making aggravated threats. In the initial case, she was held in Ohio on $100,000 bail for allegedly threatening someone with a gun at a gas station. Later, she was transferred to Allen County to face murder charges in connection with the death of Shelby. A private funeral ceremony was held for Shelby on June 29, 2021, and her remains were cremated afterward. As the murder trial progressed, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea agreement in early 2022. She pleaded guilty to murdering Shelby, attributing her actions to mental illness. A sentencing hearing is then set for September 2022 in Allen County Superior Court. During the hearing, Valerie pleaded guilty but mentally ill, as agreed upon in the plea deal. Her defense attorney presented mitigating circumstances, including her difficult childhood, affected by the loss of his stepmother, abuse by his half-brother, and mental health problems. Prosecutors stressed that jealousy was the insignificant motive behind Valerie's decision to kill Shelby. They also highlighted Valerie's extensive criminal history, which had worsened over time. Notably, Valerie was on probation and part of an alternative program due to prior charges when she murdered Shelby. During the hearing, Valerie exhibited unpredictable behavior, appearing composed and aware at times, while at other moments she seemed anxious, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. However, she answered the court's questions accurately. However, Valerie never expressed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents were extremely sad and desperate because of the loss of their beloved child. Shelby's father recalled that his daughter had a strong affection for symbols that represented peace. He stated that Valerie seemed to take pride in admitting to the murder, showing no remorse for her crime. He also questioned whether jealousy was the only reason for the killing, he believing there must be more to the story. He vowed to continue seeking answers about the tragedy. He also expressed concern for Valerie's children, who would undoubtedly suffer as a result of their mother's actions. Shelby's father shared that he had forgiven Valerie to find peace of mind, inspired by his faith in God. He was confident that Shelby was with God and expressed his deep love for her. Shelby's mother, Shauna, remembers her daughter as a kind and thoughtful person who always went out of her way to help friends, no matter the distance. Shauna is haunted by memories of her dead daughter and struggles with guilt and helplessness for not being able to keep her safe. Shauna acknowledged Shelby's bravery in naming her attacker twice and continuing to fight for her life after the assault. Shauna described Shelby's severe injuries, including a racing heart that her body couldn't sustain. Despite incurring nearly $500,000 in medical expenses, Shauna didn't seek compensation, as these were waived upon Shelby's death. The funeral expenses were around $115,000, but Shauna didn't want any money from Valerie. Shelby's mother, Shauna, fought back tears as she shared that all she had left were memories of her daughter. She expressed a wish to trade places with her child, revealing that the pain of her loss was so overwhelming on some days that she couldn't even get out of bed. The court had heard from the lawyers and Shelby's family, and now it was waiting for the judge's decision. Under Indiana law, the possible sentence ranged from 45 to 65 years, with an average of 55 years. Valerie's defense team asked for the minimum sentence, pointing out various factors that they believed should be taken into consideration. In contrast, the prosecution argued for the maximum sentence. Before making his decision, the judge stated that it was clear the murder was planned and that Valerie knew exactly what she was doing when she committed the crime, as evidenced by her attempt to flee to Ohio. The judge acknowledged that Valerie had faced significant difficulty in her life, including inadequate education, personal trauma, and mental health issues. Despite having a traumatic past, it was not accepted as a justification for her behavior. As a result, the judge sentenced Valerie to the maximum 65-year prison term. The judge also ordered the destruction of the murder weapon. Valerie is currently serving her sentence at the Indiana Women's Prison, with the earliest possible release date being June 18, 2087, when she will be 72 years old, according to the American Correctional System's records. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disability since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Furia home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978 in Columbia, South Carolina. She spent her childhood in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. As a cheerful and outgoing person, Danielle had to mature quickly when she became pregnant at 16. Despite her youth, she was confident in her ability to be a good mother. However, her relationship with Carl, the father of her child, didn't last, and they eventually broke up. In 1996, at the age of 17, Danielle gave birth to her son Tristan, becoming a single mother. Determined to provide the best life for herself and Tristan, Danielle met Luis, who became a father figure to her son. The two had known each other since their teenage years, initially as friends, but eventually became a couple. Danielle was overjoyed to have found happiness again, and Luis took care of both her and Tristan. They moved in together, and Danielle landed an office job at a landscaping company, which she was proud of. In December 1998, Luis popped the question, and Danielle was over the moon when she said yes. At this point, her life was going great. She had a fantastic son, a loving partner, and a career that was really taking off. But in a cruel twist of fate, everything took a devastating turn for the worse on March 15, 1999. Luis returned home from work to find Danielle unresponsive on the bed. Their son Tristan was at daycare that day. The color of Danielle's skin indicated to Luis that she had passed away, so he immediately called 911. The police arrived at the Ashley Lakes apartment complex in Norcross, Georgia, where the couple resided. Initially, the only information the authorities had was that a deceased woman was in the apartment and her fiancé had called the emergency services. This naturally raised the suspicions of the investigators, as it is not uncommon for a partner to be responsible for the death of their loved one. Luis was waiting for the police at the apartment entrance and informed them that the victim was 20-year-old Danielle Jennings. He told the police that when he returned home from work, he found Danielle lying face down on the bed, and upon turning her over, he realized she was dead and promptly called 911. The police took Luis in for questioning at the station, while the crime scene investigators carefully processed the area. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed, fully clothed, with a ligature tightly wrapped around her neck. The ligature, which appeared to be a stocking, suggested that the perpetrator attacked her from behind. The bed was disheveled, and one of the dresser drawers was open, possibly indicating that the stocking was taken from it. The contents of Danielle's purse had been emptied and searched through, raising the possibility that the perpetrator's primary motive was theft. However, the fact that valuable items like cameras and jewelry were left untouched led the police to consider that the crime might have been committed to eliminate Danielle as a witness to a robbery. Alternatively, the crime scene could have been staged to mislead investigators, as there were no signs of forced entry on the front door or the sliding glass door to the backyard, which was locked. This lack of forced entry led investigators to suspect that Danielle might have let the perpetrator into her apartment or that they had access to keys. As a result, Luis became the prime suspect. During the questioning, Luis became very emotional. The investigators pointed out that romantic relationships can sometimes have tragic outcomes. They started by asking Luis about his movements on the day Danielle died. Luis said he was at work all day. He last saw Danielle when he left for work that morning. They both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle went back inside to grab something. Luis stated that Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management that day and was worried about it, seeming a little distracted. Luis stated that Danielle phoned him around 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload that prevented him from leaving his job. Later that day, Luis attempted to reach Danielle, but she was unresponsive. He then contacted her coworkers and discovered that she had gone out for lunch but failed to return. As Danielle also wasn't answering their home phone, Luis grew concerned and left work to check on her. Upon arriving at the Ashley Lakes apartments, he noticed that the front door was unlocked and slightly open, which filled him with apprehension. The police asked Luis about his relationship with Danielle, including whether they frequently argued or had family issues. Luis reported that they got along well and were deeply in love. He became distraught, arguing that the police were wasting their time by questioning him and should instead focus on finding the actual perpetrator, who was still at large. The detectives also spoke with Danielle's friends and family, all of whom were convinced that Luis was incapable of harming her. The couple had been planning their wedding and were still very much in love. Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, which verified his alibi and led to his removal from the list of suspects. During the interrogation, Luis stated that Danielle's co-worker, Jeff, a middle-aged manager, had been paying her excessive attention, which made her uncomfortable. This was corroborated by her boss when investigators visited her workplace. According to her boss, Danielle had previously complained about Jeff's behavior, alleging that he constantly hovered around her, disrupted her work, and acted inappropriately. Despite their significant age difference, Jeff was 40 and Danielle was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch, but she declined, citing her engagement to a man she loved. Jeff, however, refused to accept her rejection, suggesting that things would be different if he were 20 years younger. The company Danielle worked for took her complaints very seriously. On the day of her death, she had a meeting scheduled to discuss the complaint she had filed against Jeff, a manager at the company. Danielle was extremely anxious about this meeting, as she worried it could jeopardize her career, being a relatively new employee. Her coworkers stated that Danielle left for lunch after the meeting, but never came back, which provided investigators with a time frame for when the attack on Danielle likely occurred. The investigators' suspicions about Jeff grew when they discovered he was away from the office at the time of the crime. Furthermore, he didn't return to the office until evening. Was this merely a coincidence, or could Jeff have killed Danielle in revenge for her complaint? The investigators needed to find answers to these questions and began to focus on Jeff as a prime suspect. They explored the possibility that Jeff tailed Danielle home and attacked her when she opened the front door, which would explain the absence of forced entry. Jeff was summoned for questioning and asked to detail his relationship with Danielle. He acknowledged asking Danielle to lunch, but vigorously denied any role in her death. Although Jeff freely admitted having a liking for Danielle, he insisted he had never behaved improperly towards her and was taken aback when she lodged a complaint against him. When investigators suggested that Danielle's complaint might have motivated him to harm her, Jeff initially responded with indignation. He categorically denied being responsible for her death. Jeff claimed to have a solid alibi, stating that he spent the entire day with a colleague, driving around the city to resolve work-related issues. He provided the colleague's name, who corroborated his alibi, effectively ruling him out as a suspect. The next day, investigators reviewed the autopsy report, searching for clues to identify the killer. The report revealed that Danielle's cause of death was asphyxiation, suggesting she was caught off guard. The evidence indicated that someone had approached her from behind, pulled a stocking tight around her neck until she became unconscious, and then tied a knot to ensure she wouldn't regain consciousness. There were no signs of struggle or injury on her body, except for the ligature mark on her neck. It's possible Danielle never saw her attacker's face. Unfortunately, the crime scene yielded no useful evidence, including shoe prints, DNA, fingerprints, or hair, leaving the police with nothing to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police couldn't find any new leads, they went back to the original theory that the murder was a robbery gone wrong. They asked Luis to conduct a thorough search of the apartment with them once again. Luis carefully examined every room and insisted that nothing seemed to be out of place or missing. Everything was exactly where it should be. However, a few days later, Luis reached out to the police with a disturbing discovery. Danielle's wedding ring was nowhere to be found. Moreover, he pointed out another suspicious detail. The stocking used to strangle Danielle didn't belong to her. As Luis explained, Danielle never wore stockings, implying that the killer must have brought it with them. Without evidence, investigators turned their attention to Danielle's past, suspecting a connection between her previous relationships and what happened to her. They questioned her friends about her relationship with Carl, Tristan's father. Her best friend informed the police about Eddie, an ex-boyfriend from when Danielle was already pregnant. Eddie's behavior became increasingly violent and controlling as their relationship progressed, eventually forbidding her from seeing friends and family. After giving birth to Tristan, their relationship further deteriorated, with Eddie starting to use illegal substances. This led Danielle to end the relationship, moving out to start anew. However, Eddie refused to accept rejection, behaving erratically. Consequently, Danielle sought a restraining order, which Eddie repeatedly violated by calling her, parking near her home, and even showing up at her workplace. Danielle's family informed investigators that Eddie had been calling her multiple times in the recent months, insisting on meeting her, but she would always hang up on him. To the detectives, Eddie seemed like the perfect suspect, so they located him and brought him in for questioning. Eddie was hostile and resistant to going to the police station. When he spoke about Danielle, it was clear that it enraged him. When questioned about his relationship with Danielle, his account contradicted what her family members had said. He asserted that he had never been violent towards her and denied any involvement in her death, claiming he hadn't spoken to her in over a year. However, the investigators knew he was lying because they checked Danielle's call history, which revealed that Eddie had indeed been calling her in the months preceding her death. To determine Eddie's whereabouts during the attack on Danielle, the police investigated his alibi. Eddie claimed to have been working far away from the Ashley Lakes apartments at the time, driving out of state as a tow truck driver. His boss corroborated Eddie's story, providing motel and gas receipts that proved he was out of state on the day Danielle died. This new evidence led to yet another dead end for the investigators. Similarly, Carl, Tristan's father, was also cleared from the list of suspects. 3 days after Danielle's death, a crucial lead emerged that altered the investigation's course. While interviewing Ashley Lakes apartments residents, the police spoke with a woman who shared a strange encounter that had taken place a week prior to Danielle's death. According to her, she was awakened one morning by a knock on the door. After getting out of bed to look through the peephole, she saw no one. She returned to bed, but about a minute later, she heard the front door slam shut. Feeling scared, she got out of bed again, only to find a maintenance man standing in her living room. He claimed to be there to fix something in her apartment. However, the woman felt uneasy because he seemed more interested in looking at her than doing his job. Although she didn't know his name, she provided the police with a detailed description of him. Management at Ashley Lakes Apartments informed investigators about a separate incident involving another woman. This woman reported that a man she didn't know had entered her apartment, claiming he was there to perform maintenance and replace light bulbs. When she told him she didn't have any light bulbs that needed changing, he became flustered and said, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," before leaving. At Ashley Lakes Apartments, there were 2 maintenance specialists on staff, but only one of them matched the description provided by the 2 women, 42-year-old Calvin Oliver. When the investigator showed the women Oliver's photo, they both positively identified him. Notably, Oliver had only begun working at the complex in September 1998. Prior to Danielle's death, a total of 10 residents reported that items including cash, checks, jewelry, and computers had gone missing from their apartments. What's more, there was no evidence of forced entry on the front doors of these apartments. In fact, one of the residents even suspected that the perpetrator was a member of the staff. Calvin Oliver was a prime suspect in the apartment robbery cases due to his living in the same residential complex, allowing him to move around freely without raising any suspicions. Moreover, Oliver possessed a master key, granting him unrestricted access to all apartments. The investigators decided to probe into Oliver's potential connection to Danielle Jennings. It emerged that Oliver had performed some work in Danielle's apartment a couple of weeks prior to her death, making him a person of interest. Given his access to the apartment and knowledge of Danielle and her fiancé Luis's work schedules, it was possible that Oliver had entered their apartment undetected. Perhaps Danielle had returned home for lunch, only to find Oliver already inside her apartment. Investigators brought Calvin Oliver in for questioning, initially asking about the thefts that had prompted complaints from some residents of Ashley Lake's apartments. Oliver denied any involvement in these incidents. When questioned about Danielle Jennings, he claimed to be aware of what had happened to her, but insisted he didn't know her personally. The only admission he made was that he had done some work in her apartment. At that point, the police didn't have any concrete evidence linking Oliver to the crime. Before releasing him, they decided to run a check on Oliver in their database. The results were shocking. Oliver was found to have an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a burglary charge. This charge was related to the theft of personal checks. Furthermore, Oliver had a long history of criminal activity dating back to 1974. According to records from the Georgia Department of Correction, by the age of 18, Oliver had already been convicted of several serious crimes, including multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery using force, larceny, and forcing a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, he spent most of his life behind bars. Oliver had a motive to harm Danielle if she caught him in her apartment, as he didn't want to go back to prison with an active warrant out for his arrest. After the police took him in, they had more time to investigate his possible role in her death. While looking into the thefts at Ashley Lake's apartments, the police got a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. Inside, they found stolen items belonging to other residents and, crucially, Danielle's wedding ring, which connected Oliver to her murder. 9 days following Danielle Jennings' death, Calvin Oliver was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and burglary. During the interrogation, investigators asked Oliver about the stolen wedding ring. He claimed that he had taken it about 3 weeks prior to her death. However, several witnesses contradicted his statement, reporting that they had seen the ring on Danielle's finger the day before her body was discovered. After being caught in this inconsistency, Oliver refused to cooperate and provide further information. At the trial, the prosecutor claimed that Oliver murdered Danielle when she came home unexpectedly and caught him in the act of stealing. Following a 5-day trial that concluded on October 13, 2000, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts against Oliver. The court subsequently sentenced him to life imprisonment for Danielle Jennings' murder, plus an additional 20 years for the theft of her wedding ring. Danielle's mother and stepfather, Sherry and Philip Jennings, eventually gained custody of her son, Tristan. It was later revealed that the management of Ashley Lake's apartments knew about Oliver's criminal past, but failed to check his background thoroughly. They also didn't warn other residents when a series of thefts occurred. When this information became known, Danielle's family sued Ashley Lake's apartments. The Jennings family brought claims for negligent hiring and retention, failure to provide adequate security, and failure to warn residents, among other charges. They sought punitive damages. Following the trial, the jury returned a verdict in excess of $13 million for wrongful death and for pain and suffering. The jury also awarded $2.5 million in punitive damages, an amount later reduced to $250,000 based on the finding that there was no specific intent to harm. According to plaintiff attorneys, the complex's key policy was also flawed. Employees had access to residents' keys, and the lockbox containing the keys to the complex's 240 apartments was often left unsecured. Calvin Oliver is presently incarcerated and serving a life sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Gallagher Reinert was born in 1943 in the charming town of Ridgeway, located in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents were William and Jane Gallagher, with her father working as a newspaper business manager and her mother being a dedicated school teacher. These early influences played a significant role in shaping Susan's path. From a young age, it was evident that she was destined to follow in her mother's footsteps, displaying a passion for learning and an innate love for literature. Her educational journey commenced at Grove City College, where she crossed paths with a young Air Force man named Kenneth Reinhard. This chance encounter would go on to change the trajectory of her life. Susan and Kenneth fell in love during their undergraduate studies. Susan's hard work and commitment paid off when she graduated with a bachelor's degree. But she didn't stop there. She went on to earn a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. In 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, Susan and Kenneth got married and started a new chapter of their lives. As a military couple, they were stationed in various places across the country, first moving to the West Coast and living in Sacramento, California, before returning to the Northeast and settling in Rome, New York. They even spent some time in Puerto Rico before eventually finding their permanent home in the Philadelphia region in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhard, a dedicated teacher and loving mother, faced an unexpected twist in her life when she and Kenneth decided to separate. Despite the divorce, it was a peaceful parting, closing a chapter in their lives without legal disputes. Susan, a vibrant single mother, focused on creating a warm home for her two kids, Karen and Michael. Known for her warm and friendly nature, Susan was beloved by colleagues and students at Chestnut Walled Elementary School. Outside of her professional life, Susan dedicated time to Parents Without Partners. Following her mother's death, Susan, emotionally weighed down, found strength in her connection with the organization. Despite the challenges, she remained resilient, leaning on Parents Without Partners for support as she navigated loss and change. Her story took a mysterious turn in the months leading up to her disappearance. Her mother's death and a substantial inheritance added complexity to her life, yet Susan's strength and resilience, along with her support network, hinted at a resilient spirit facing the unknown. On Friday, June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhart and her two children embarked on what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, Michael, Susan's son, spent time with his father, Kenneth, who worked as a senior personnel officer for Fidelity Bank in the neighboring suburb near Philadelphia. That evening, they shared a special moment by participating in a father-son softball game. However, the game was cut short when Susan arrived to pick up Michael at approximately 8:30 p.m. Michael made a call to Kenneth at home, apologizing for their early departure from the game. Later that evening, Susan reached out to her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhard, with whom she maintained a warm relationship even after her divorce. With close to a full tank, Susan ensured she had enough fuel for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town located about an hour north. Her plan was to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use it as a weekend getaway for her and the kids. Susan had signed up to moderate a workshop and registered her two children for events that weekend. They intended to leave on Saturday morning and return later in the weekend. That Friday evening, around 9 p.m., 11-year-old Karen and 10-year-old Michael were outside collecting hailstones left behind by a summer storm. Approximately half an hour later, neighbors heard the distinct sound of Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon starting up. A few minutes later, the hatchback was no longer in Susan's driveway. Susan had left home with her two children, presumably heading to visit her boyfriend that evening before heading to the conference. Susan had a long-standing affair with William Bradfield, also a teacher, and despite the secrecy, it strained her marriage with Kenneth. Rumors spread that Susan and William might marry. On June 22, 1979, Susan set off on a trip with her children after visiting her boyfriend. Their planned destination was Allentown, approximately 49 miles to the north, where they intended to spend the night in a motel. However, the expected trip never took place. Instead, Susan and her two children vanished without a trace. 2 days passed without any sign of Susan Reinhart and her two children. The days of uncertainty and worry were taking their toll on those who knew and loved them. Then on June 25, 1979, the orange Plymouth hatchback that Susan had been driving was discovered in the parking lot of the Houston Hotel in Harrisburg. This was 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan Reinhardt's lifeless body was discovered in the back of her vehicle. The details of her tragic demise were gruesome. Her nude, battered body was bound in chains and curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were bound, and she had 2 black eyes. It was evident that she had either been beaten with chains or bound so tightly that the chains had left bruises on her back. Even more horrifying, she had been administered a lethal dose of morphine. However, the whereabouts of her 2 children remained unknown, as they had seemingly vanished without a trace. The police searched for hours, hoping the children were with a babysitter. However, none of Susan's regular sitters, friends, or family had seen them that weekend. So, the police began looking for answers. First, the police plastered pictures of the Reinhardt family across newspapers for weeks, hoping to find any leads on the 2 missing children. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts were available. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that Susan Reinhardt had named William Bradfield, the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth a substantial $730,000. This raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to clear the way for this financial windfall. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was already dealing with its share of turmoil. The principal, Jay, was involved in a scandal. He had been the principal until the previous year, when he was relieved of his post. Jay was fired after he was arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Equally unsettling, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Even before this, Jay's life was falling apart. His wife, Stephanie, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and she would ultimately succumb to it in August of 1979. The following years saw her in and out of hospitals during this time. She began keeping a diary in which she made note of her husband's bizarre behavior, which began to truly escalate during this period. He began to participate in group intimacy and swinging groups, which she herself was not too keen on, and this seemed to precede even more alarming behavior. In September of 1977, the couple's adult daughter, also named Stephanie, decided to return home to live with her parents. Stephanie brought her husband, Edward Hunsberger, with her, and the 2 moved into the Jays' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Stephanie was in the middle of a battle with cancer, so the family was in the midst of uncertainty, and it seemed like tensions were between all of them. Edward and Stephanie Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law respectively, were no saints. Both had been battling heroin addiction for some time and had struggled to find and keep employment in the years preceding their move. Then, moving back home with Stephanie's parents was an act of desperation and a way for them to stay away from drugs. In the early months of 1978, just a few months after moving in with Jay Smith and his ailing wife, their daughter Stephanie and son-in-law Edward mysteriously went missing. The last known sighting of Stephanie and Edward was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Upon leaving, they mentioned they would return for another visit soon, but they never showed up again. Edward also failed to meet with his probation officer as scheduled. Later that month, authorities would begin to reach out to their last known contact, Jay Smith, who would tell anyone interested in hearing his side of the story that Edward and Stephanie had left for California. According to him, the 2 had owed money to some drug dealers in the region and had fled to the West Coast, but he couldn't provide any more information than that. Edward and Stephanie had been living as nomads, so no one noticed their disappearance. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his house revealed alarming findings alongside firearms. Authorities found marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms, badges, and disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was connected to recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for theft, Jay's alibi witness, William, testified that they were on vacation during the robberies. However, the jury didn't buy it. Jay had an unsettling reputation at Upper Marin, earning the nickname the Prince of Darkness. Susan's autopsy indicated death from strangulation or suffocation, with a wide time frame for her demise. Investigators questioned Jay about his whereabouts during that period, but he couldn't provide a coherent answer. An official stated that there was enough morphine in her system to kill her 10 times over, strongly indicating an intentional overdose. Jay was eventually found guilty of a series of store robberies that occurred during the late 1970s, and on June 25, 1979, he was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison, just as the investigation was intensifying. But that wasn't all. Even though Jay was imprisoned for his burglary charges, the police still saw him as the main suspect and began investigating his background further. Only then did they discover that Jay's daughter and husband had gone missing in a similar manner as Susan and her 2 children. The police suspected that there could be connections between the disappearance of the couple, Susan's death, and the disappearance of her children. Firstly, Susan was killed by a morphine overdose, and a large quantity of morphine was found in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit insignia was discovered in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law bore a striking resemblance to the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that took place during this crime were truly shocking and left a lasting impact on the public, but the real shocker was yet to come. In the last weeks of July 1979, approximately a month after the discovery of Susan's body near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for this tragic crime: financial gain. On July 20th, 1979, a lawyer from Philadelphia filed a caveat in both Montgomery and Delaware counties on behalf of Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinhard, and her brother, Patrick Reinhardt. This legal maneuver was intended to temporarily halt the processing of any will that Susan might have left behind in either county. The purpose was to allow these 2 parties, Susan's ex-husband and her brother, the opportunity to review the will. They chose to file this in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was situated near the county border, making it feasible for her to have filed a will in either location. The following week, it was revealed that just a few weeks before her tragic death, Susan had made significant changes to her will. She'd also acquired several expensive life insurance policies, designating her boyfriend at the time as the beneficiary. In her legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police delved deeper into the case, they learned that Susan's death occurred sometime between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24th. William and the other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday, where they stayed until the afternoon of Monday, June 25th. However, William's exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance remained unclear, suggesting a potential gap in his alibi. It also revealed that Susan had been withdrawing substantial sums of cash from her accounts, totaling approximately $25,000, which she did through several deposits due to daily withdrawal limits. She informed bank employees that she intended to invest the funds in multiple high-yielding investments managed by her boyfriend, William Bradfield, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan didn't know was that she was just one of several women in William's life. He was dating multiple people, including one of their fellow English teachers, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly a decade. Allegedly, William had promised to handle these financial transactions and assured her that the investments would yield substantial returns to fund their upcoming marriage and relocation to England. When investigators looked into the case, they discovered fake stocks and bonds inside Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. However, it later became clear that William had given these fraudulent securities to Susan, having forged and sold them to her. These bogus securities were linked to mostly non-existent companies and held little value, pointing to a long-running deception by Susan's lover. This revelation added a new dimension to the story, intensifying the existing financial motive. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil suit, but during his initial appearance, he refused to answer questions, deferring inquiries to his legal counsel. His lawyers, on the other hand, denied that he had taken Susan's money, but were open to negotiating a settlement with the state to resolve the matter and process Susan's will, which stood to be $7 million. In June of 1980, William testified for the first time as part of the civil trial. He downplayed almost every connection he had to the case. William claimed his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her friends and family. He also testified that he and Susan had not been planning to get married later that year, despite Susan telling numerous confidants otherwise. Furthermore, William implied that Susan had engaged in a secret affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, but this was not supported by any evidence. Many friends and family members recalled Susan being in a long-term relationship with William, but they did not mention a relationship with Jay Smith, who was in the state prison during the trial. William refused to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of an estate worth more than $1 million. He portrayed Susan as an unreliable person, always in trouble, and blamed her for her own problems, stating he was just helping to clean up her messes. As the civil suit into the missing $25,000 progressed, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit in June 1980, aiming to recover the full amount of an insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just weeks before her death, around $450,000, and move the funds into a trust for a private investigation. The case took several unexpected turns, and the twists kept coming. On February 20, 1981, police arrested William on 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy, alleging that he had kept the $25,000 Susan had given him, ostensibly for investment. A former student of William's, Wendy Ziegler, was also charged as a co-conspirator. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but the criminal trial was set for the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the original civil suit came to a resolution. It was announced that $36,000 would be allocated from Susan's estate to pay for further investigations into the whereabouts of the children and contest the rest of Susan's will, preventing William from receiving any funds. On August 3, 1981, William's 5-day trial ended with a guilty verdict for theft. Delaware County Prosecutor Edward Weiss requested an increase in Williams' bond from $25,000 to $75,000, as they believed the conviction increased the flight risk, particularly given the looming possibility of murder charges. This request was granted by Judge Robert A. Wright. On April 6, 1983, William was taken into custody by Pennsylvania state troopers and charged with 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and obstructing the administration of the law. The grand jury's findings pointed to William's awareness of the plot to kill Susan and her children and his alleged complicity in these crimes. However, J.J., who was believed to be involved, wasn't charged at that time. The indictment relied partially on a confession from an inmate named Proctor Noel, who claimed that William had confessed to his involvement in the murders during a chess match in prison. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 marked a turning point in the case. While there was no direct evidence linking William to the murder of Susan Reinhardt or the disappearance of her 2 children, prosecutors were confident in their case. William's prior theft conviction added context, and the connection to persons unknown, believed to be responsible for disposing of the bodies, further implicated him. In the 1980s, Jay Smith, who was serving time for unrelated convictions, was unable to avoid testifying before a grand jury, despite asserting his Fifth Amendment right. William Bradfield was called to testify in 1984, but the details of his testimony remained undisclosed. This round of questioning was believed to be related to Jay Smith's missing daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Hunsberger. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples, likely related to documents written years before that may have detailed a plan to murder Susan Reinhardt. This eventually led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinhardt's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody while awaiting trial. Joseph Wall, a noted crime author, released a book about the case in 1984, favoring the theory that JJ was the actual killer. A TV miniseries adaptation followed, further exposing the case to a national audience. JJ continued to maintain his innocence from prison, attempting appeals and alleging that he'd been framed by William Bradfield. It wasn't until 1989 that the court decided to revisit his case and discovered issues with the prosecution, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a full investigation. By 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, vacating his murder conviction and finding issues with the prosecution's conduct. Over the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing JSJ to live the rest of his life as a free man. William Bradfield continued to evade court rulings, refusing to repay the $25,000 he owed to Susan Reinhardt's estate. The lawsuit was finally settled in 1996. Jay filed lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wall, alleging defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were ultimately dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been incarcerated for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead of cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinhard, Susan Reiner's ex-husband, passed away in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. JJ, whose sentence was vacated in 1992, went on to write books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, with his involvement in the story and the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Hunsberger, still unresolved. To this day, these cases remain unsolved. The Reinhardt murders is a story that continues to shock people with its many twists and disturbing revelations. One day, a phone call shattered the quiet of the police station. An unknown caller, with a voice distorted by static, revealed a chilling secret. The body of Lily Adams, who had been missing for months, was allegedly buried in the garden of Lucas Henderson's house. Without wasting a second, a team of detectives, dog handlers, and forensic experts hurried to Lucas's residence. Shovels tore into the earth in search of Lily's remains, but no trace of her body was found. Numerous attempts by the police to contact Lucas proved futile. He seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving behind a heavy silence. For a year, fruitless searches and gnawing questions plagued the investigators. Where was Lucas? What had really happened to Lily? Just when all hope seemed lost, the phone rang again. This time, it was Lucas. His voice was shaky, laden with guilt. Lucas confessed that Lily had taken her own life, and he had disappeared out of fear of being blamed. "I didn't kill her," he repeated, but he couldn't explain where Lily's body was. This conversation only deepened the mystery, leaving the investigators exhausted and at a dead end. Would they ever uncover the truth about Lily's fate and who was truly responsible for this tragedy? Who was Lily, and why did her disappearance captivate the public's attention? In 1978, in a small town in Ohio, a girl named Lily was born into an ordinary family. Concerned for her daughter's future, Lily's mother made a life-altering decision to send her to the United States, hoping for better opportunities. Lily was adopted by a military family, where she grew up alongside another girl named Emma. The two, unaware of their shared bloodline, quickly became inseparable friends. Lily, living with her foster family, had no idea that her American father was in fact her biological parent, making Emma her half-sister. As they grew older, Lily and Emma moved out and decided to start fresh together in California. They rented a cozy apartment near a popular karaoke bar, which soon became their favorite hangout. Life seemed rosy for Lily, who embraced beauty and positivity as her life philosophy. Her world was filled with love and laughter when she met Mark. They quickly fell for each other, got married, and had a daughter named Joy, symbolizing their shared happiness. However, Mark's mysterious past and his secretive nature cast a shadow over their life. Despite her seemingly perfect personal life, Lily aspired to work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. She began studying criminal law, dreaming of a noble career. But the path was fraught with challenges, and despite her relentless efforts, Lily left the police force without realizing her dream. Her once bright life dimmed as she battled a worsening mental disorder, the result of horrific sexual abuse in her youth that left deep emotional scars. As her mental health deteriorated, so did her relationship with Mark. Their once passionate love turned to ashes of disappointment, leading to a painful divorce. The breakup, coupled with her career downfall and futile job searches, took a heavy toll on Lily. Realizing she could no longer provide a stable environment for Joy, Lily and Mark decided that he would take full custody. Despite their bitter experiences, they remained friends, both striving to do what was best for their daughter. Lily tried to visit Joy as often as possible, never missing a birthday. Lily's journey to find her place in the world was marred by struggles, but she refused to be broken by despair. She had been through a lot, but her spirit remained uncrushed as she sought to rebuild her life amidst the chaos. In the aftermath of her divorce, Lily moved to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, hoping the serene environment would aid her recovery. She found solace in nature, spending long hours hiking through forests and along the coastline. Slowly, Lily began to regain her sense of self, even starting to volunteer at a local animal shelter. It was there she met David, a kind-hearted veterinarian with a gentle demeanor. Their friendship blossomed into a quiet romance, giving Lily a renewed sense of hope. David was supportive, encouraging Lily to pursue her interests. With his help, she started taking art classes, finding an outlet for her emotions through painting. Lily's artwork, deeply personal and expressive, caught the attention of a local gallery owner who offered to showcase her pieces. This newfound recognition gave Lily a purpose and a platform to share her story. However, despite the progress, the past continued to haunt her. Occasional nightmares and bouts of anxiety reminded her of the unresolved mysteries surrounding Lucas and the loss of her friend Emma, who had also disappeared under mysterious circumstances years ago. Determined to seek closure, Lily hired a private investigator to look into Emma's case. This decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one filled with the pursuit of truth and justice. The investigator's findings were both shocking and revealing. Emma had been living under an assumed name in another state, hiding from an abusive partner. Reuniting with Emma brought a sense of closure to Lily, and they rekindled their deep friendship. Together, they supported each other in their healing journeys, proving that even in the face of profound loss and trauma, resilience and hope could prevail. Lily's story is one of survival, courage, and the enduring power of friendship and love. Despite the shadows of her past, she emerged stronger, finding beauty and meaning in her life once more. Her journey reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is always a glimmer of hope waiting to be discovered. One day, Clara found the missing piece in her life: faith. Clara began attending the Sunshine Coast Church, led by the charismatic pastor John Mitchell. From his first words, simple and heartfelt, Clara felt welcomed into this congregation, enveloped in an atmosphere of love. The church, situated in the picturesque town of Clearwater, Florida, was founded by John and his wife, Lisa Mitchell, who were known for their kindness and warmth. They created the Church of Hope, a sanctuary where everyone could find support and solace. This church became more than a place of worship for Clara. It became her refuge, a true home filled with love. In this nurturing environment, Clara found a new family that embraced her with open arms. She began to flourish, shedding the layers of sorrow and despair that had once weighed her down. Each day brought a renewed sense of joy, and a smile began to spread across her face. The gentle Florida sun seemed to reflect in Clara's eyes, which now shone with a new hope. She gained strength, both physically and emotionally, and a deep sense of happiness blossomed within her soul. For Clara, the church wasn't just a building. It was a community of caring individuals who shared a common faith. Despite the church's modest exterior, inside it felt like a cozy home. The parishioners, seated on simple chairs arranged in neat rows, were united by their shared belief. Time seemed to stand still in this sacred space, as the community gathered in a spirit of unity and devotion. However, Clara carried a heavy secret. Hidden beneath her flowing dresses was the growing evidence of her pregnancy, a fact she kept concealed out of shame and fear. Only those closest to her knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 35, Clara gave birth to her second daughter, Hope. The news of her new arrival quickly spread through the quiet town, raising many questions about the child's father. The truth was painful. The father of Clara's child was a man she had dated briefly, who had abused and humiliated her. When she became pregnant, he vanished without a trace, leaving Clara alone and heartbroken. Despite this, Clara found renewed hope within the walls of the church. The Mitchells, along with the congregation, surrounded Clara and her newborn with care and love, becoming the family she so desperately needed. Clara knew she was no longer alone. Just 3 months after giving birth, Clara stunned everyone with an unexpected message on social media. She announced she was leaving, cutting all ties with her past, and pursuing a dream she had never mentioned before. Clara's message expressed love for her family and friends, but it was clear she was determined to make a fresh start. Without revealing her destination or plans, she disappeared, as if she had vanished into thin air. Clara's sudden departure left her loved ones in despair. Her ex-husband, Alex, was particularly distraught and immediately contacted the police, desperate to uncover the mystery behind her disappearance. Days turned into weeks, and the lack of information only intensified their worry. Adding to the mystery, Clara had left without her 3-month-old daughter. Clara's sister, Sarah, was immediately suspicious. "This isn't like her," she said, her voice trembling. Clara had always been a devoted mother to her 7-year-old son, Ethan. Alex was shocked that Clara had stopped visiting Ethan, recalling their inseparable bond with sadness. The 35-year-old's disappearance seemed inexplicable, even though she had the right to start anew. The police could not ignore the circumstances and began an investigation. They scrutinized Clara's last messages and noticed a strange inconsistency in her writing style, suggesting the possibility of coercion or forgery. This revelation cast a shadow over the investigation, prompting deeper scrutiny into Clara's personal life. Doubts emerged about the father of Clara's daughter, Hope. Her relationship with the man was evidently troubled, but even her sister Sarah couldn't confirm or deny these suspicions. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Clara's disappearance was shrouded in mystery, leaving her family and the community grappling with unanswered questions and an aching sense of loss. The mysterious disappearance of Marie sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, unraveling a tapestry of secrets and suspicions that threatened to engulf all those involved. The intricate web of intrigue, woven with strange messages and lingering doubts about Grace's paternity, presented a labyrinthine puzzle that law enforcement found themselves grappling with as they sought to unearth the truth buried beneath layers of deception. In a pivotal exchange with the police, Tanya and James Flanders endeavored to provide clarity on the bewildering circumstances surrounding Marie's sudden absence. Their narrative painted a portrait of a woman besieged by inner demons, wrestling with the tumultuous currents of bipolar disorder that often left her adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Marie's penchant for inexplicable disappearances, punctuated by bouts of depression, hinted at a fragile psyche teetering on the brink of collapse. The sequence of events leading up to Marie's vanishing act unfolded with a disquieting rhythm. A seemingly ordinary lunchtime interrupted by Marie's sudden retreat to bed, followed by an unexplained absence that left the Flanders household reeling in confusion and fear. James's intuition, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, led him to the airport where Marie's abandoned car stood as a silent sentinel, bearing witness to the mystery that lay shrouded in its wake. Despite meticulous scrutiny, forensic examination of the vehicle yielded scant clues, leaving investigators grasping at straws in their pursuit of elusive answers. The absence of tangible evidence only served to deepen the enigma, fueling speculation about Marie's fate. Was her disappearance the calculated act of a mastermind, or the tragic consequence of a mind consumed by inner turmoil? As the investigation veered towards the grim reality of a potential homicide, attention turned to the shadowy figure purported to be Grace's biological father, a spectral presence haunting the fringes of Marie's tumultuous life. The hallowed sanctuary of the church, once a bastion of solace for Marie, now stood as a crucible of whispered secrets and unspoken truths, its sacred halls echoing with the weight of untold confessions and hidden sins. Among the congregation, rumors swirled like eddies in a tempest, hinting at the clandestine machinations that had ensnared Marie in a web of deceit. The revelation of Grace's true paternity, a revelation delivered by Marie's ex-husband Jeff with seismic force, shattered preconceived notions and laid bare the raw truth. James Flanders, pillar of the community, stood as the biological father of Grace. In the aftermath of this earth-shattering revelation, Tanya bravely stepped forward to corroborate the truth. Her words a testament to the complexities of human relationships and the enduring power of love that transcended mere biology. Yet, amidst the turmoil and upheaval, one truth remained immutable: the quest for justice and closure for Marie, whose memory lingered as a haunting specter in the hearts and minds of all who had known her. As the investigation into Marie's disappearance deepened, unsettling revelations about her relationship with James and Tanya began to surface. It became apparent that James had been intimately involved with both women, leading to accusations of polygamy rather than mere infidelity. Shockingly, there were instances where they even organized celebrations, such as the child's birthday, where James, Tanya, and Marie posed together, presenting a facade of familial happiness. However, subsequent inquiries among Tanya's friends shed light on the true nature of the situation. Despite Tanya's claims of Marie's contentment, it became evident that Marie's feelings had shifted after Grace's birth. Maternal instincts stirred within her, fueling jealousy towards Tanya and suspicions that she intended to reclaim her role as Grace's mother and perhaps win back James's affections. These revelations cast Tanya as a prime suspect, particularly since Marie's disappearance would conveniently resolve Tanya's own problems. Despite exhaustive efforts by investigators, including the use of GPS and analysis of phone records, concrete answers remained elusive. However, the unexpected testimony of Jason, the young priest, brought new insights into James's behavior, further complicating the case. Jason's revelation about overhearing James's expressions of sadness and anxiety following Marie's disappearance added a layer of intrigue. James's subsequent admission of his relationships with both women, coupled with Marie's disappearance shortly after a heated argument, led to his resignation as pastor and abrupt departure with his family. The discovery of Marie's phone, albeit with most data deleted, provided a glimmer of hope for investigators. A video found on the phone, featuring James advertising precious metals, raised further suspicions. Yet, despite the mounting evidence, the mystery surrounding Marie's disappearance persisted, leaving investigators grappling for answers in the midst of conflicting testimonies and unanswered questions. In the past, the landscape of crime was vastly different, characterized by lax surveillance and primitive forensic capabilities. Surveillance cameras were not as ubiquitous, and digital trails were easily obscured, providing ample opportunities for criminals to evade detection. Despite the emergence of nascent DNA detection technologies, criminals often slipped through the cracks, eluding justice with alarming frequency. However, amidst this seemingly impenetrable veil of impunity, the field of digital forensics was quietly advancing. It wasn't until 3 years after Maria's disappearance that a breakthrough occurred. A revolutionary program surfaced, capable of retrieving data from phones and computers, opening a window into the clandestine world of communication between Marie and James. Within these digital exchanges lay a trove of revelations, exposing James's clandestine activities and shedding light on the true nature of their relationship. Amongst the digital detritus, Maria's final words emerged, poignant and haunting, expressing her longing to escape Fort Walton Beach and her steadfast refusal to abandon her child in such a place of torment. As the secrets of the Flanders unraveled in the digital ether, James's messages took on an almost prophetic tone, echoing the solemnity of a sermon as he expressed his fervent desire for retribution against those who wronged him. Yet, even amidst this swirling vortex of mystery, enough evidence surfaced to warrant an arrest and charge James with second-degree murder. Nevertheless, the prosecutor's office faced a formidable task, convincing a skeptical jury of James's guilt in the absence of Maria's body, plunging them into a morass of uncertainty and doubt. James and his legal counsel ultimately made a pivotal decision, opting for a last-ditch effort to reveal the location of the woman's body. However, they weighed the consequences, understanding that such an admission would likely result in a charge of manslaughter, albeit with a moderate punishment. Exhausted by years of anguish and uncertainty, Marie's family reluctantly agreed to this course of action, desperate for closure and the truth. As James spoke, his words carried the weight of a confession, not only to himself, but to the entire world. He recounted the tumultuous moments of their relationship, detailing Marie's struggles with inner demons, particularly her battles with depression. In a chilling revelation, James described an argument where Marie, in a fit of distress, pushed him, leading to a tragic accident where she fell to the ground, lifeless. This harrowing moment marked a turning point, forever altering their lives. When investigators finally unearthed Marie's body, buried in the yard of James's residence, it sent shockwaves through everyone involved. Despite years of searching, her remains had remained elusive until James guided them to the grim discovery, buried beneath 5 feet of earth, wrapped in a blanket. The revelation dealt a heavy blow to all parties embroiled in the case. Subsequently, James Flanders received a sentence of 15 years in prison for manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya Flanders, appeared to be blindsided by Marie's death, as attested by a witness, none other than Flanders' own lawyer. Had Marie's body been discovered earlier, experts might have been able to ascertain the cause of her demise, potentially altering the trajectory of the investigation. 5 years later, at Marie's funeral, she finally found peace, while her sister Esther likely sang a poignant farewell. Yet the fate of little Grace remains an unresolved enigma. At 11 years old, she resides in Arizona with her mother, Tanya Flanders, her future shrouded in uncertainty. In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, the star of a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Verdejo Sanchez, shone brightly. He was called a diamond, one of the most promising athletes of his country. He was predicted to win titles and gold medals. Then it seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man will reach fantastic heights in sports. In 2021, the name of the boxer again traveled all the world's media, but this time fell into the section of criminal chronicles. This story is about a teenage attachment that grew into a kind of addiction and led to a terrible tragedy, and also about how the author of The Main Knockout of 2014, who was praised and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, almost received a death sentence, but eventually went to prison for life. It is noteworthy that despite the presence of irrefutable evidence and confessions of the boxer's accomplice, he himself to this day refuses to plead guilty. The future star of world boxing was born in the Puerto Rican city of San Juan in 1993 on May 19th. He grew up in a rather modest large family, and from an early age was fond of port. True, in childhood, he planned to connect his life with baseball, but his further fate was determined by a funny incident. When the boy was 9 years old, a family friend came to visit them with his son of the same age. The boys were playing in the yard, but suddenly quarreled, and a fight broke out. Parents separated the children, and the father of the future athlete noted that if he wants to fight with someone in the future, let him wear boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix, at his request, was taken to a local gym, where the boy, as he later admitted himself, from the first training session fell in love with boxing. At the age of 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he won his country's championship, and a year later, he went to the Olympic Games in London, where he reached the quarterfinals. In the same year began his brilliant career in the professional ring. In total, Verdejo had 29 fights, gaining 27 confident victories, and in 2014 he was recognized as the author of the best knockout in the fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he subsequently defended 6 more times in 2 years. Everyone who saw him in the fight had no doubt. This young man will write his name in the history of world boxing. And now let's get to know Keishla Rodriguez. The girl was born in November 1993 in San Juan. The full name given to her at birth is Keishla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, had another common daughter, Bereliz Nicole, and also the couple raised Kayla's son, Jonathan, from a previous marriage of a woman. Keishla grew up an open and sociable girl. She did well in school and adored animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Her best friend was her sister Bereliz, to whom she confided all her secrets and worries. Keishla studied in the same school with Felix Verdejo, who was her age. Young people were acquainted since childhood, and in adolescence between them began a romantic relationship. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced and separated. Kayla moved to relatives in Florida, and her daughters, who were by then already adults, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite the fact that each of the sisters had long since lived their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and told each other about everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer, who has already managed to take part in the Olympic Games, had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, the girl was only 14 years old, and she was still in school, but even then she made big plans for the future with a promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Eliza's parents were not at all against this relationship. Attractive and talented Felix, who has always had a lot of fans, becoming a boxing star, literally bathed in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to spin a novel or a passing affair on the side, and also, despite the serious relationship with Eliza, continued to meet with his school friend Keishla. Keishla's sister, Bereliz, and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Eliza considered herself the only woman and great love of the athlete, was preparing for the wedding, and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Keishla knew that the lover has a fiancé, but at the same time, Felix did not let her go. On top of that, he was her first great love, and deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, the boxer did marry the young Eliza, who at that time was barely 19 years old. Eliza by that time was already quite a famous model, had tens of thousands of followers in social networks, and also opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. In August of the same year, just a few months after the wedding, the athlete got into a serious car accident when he was rushing on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, seriously feared that his talented charge would go off the rails at the height of his career. But Felix, contrary to the disappointing prognosis, made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, the boxer published in his profile in the social network a picture with Elise, who was in a large term of pregnancy. In the comment to the photo, he wrote, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." And a month later, he announced the birth of a daughter, who was given the name Miranda Verdejo Santiago. The young man in public looked like a loving husband, caring father, and an exemplary family man. But secretly from his wife, he continued to meet with Keishla, who could not let go. As Eliza later admitted, she guessed that her husband was cheating on her, but every time he tearfully vowed to leave his mistress. Keishla repeatedly tried to break off this painful relationship, but Felix would not let her go. She had no other men, because the boxer threatened that if he found out about the fact that Keishla had someone not good for her and her chosen one, Keishla herself, who had fallen in love with Verdejo since high school, continued to love him despite everything. Rodriguez, as planned, connected her life with the care of animals and got a job at the Center of Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics. Colleagues described her as conscientious, hardworking, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, which she simply adored. In 2020, Eliza discovered the correspondence of her husband with several mistresses, including Keishla. The wife gave her husband a scandal and threw him out of the house, threatening that she would file for divorce and forbid him to see his daughter. Eliza's threats had an effect. In addition, in the career of the athlete at that time, there was a serious decline and unnecessary problems where he did not need. For a while, he really stopped seeing Rodriguez, but Felix still did not let her go, trying to control almost every step Keishla. After a few months of secret visits resumed, and in April 2021, Keishla discovered that she was pregnant. She bought a rapid test at the drugstore, which only confirmed her fears. She first called her sister, who was aware of her complicated relationship with the athlete, and told her everything. It was out of the question to have an abortion, because Keishla was already 27 years old, and she was ready to have a child, even if she had to raise it on her own. A few days later, Keishla broke the news to the father of her child, hoping in her heart that he would accept it, but Felix was not happy, to put it mildly. He got angry and told his mistress that she should go to the doctor, and if the pregnancy is confirmed, it will be necessary to have an abortion. Naturally, Rodriguez answered him with a firm refusal, but the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child will finally destroy his reputation, and this he cannot allow. After Keishla's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed, and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Keishla immediately get rid of the child, but she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Keishla a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and did not get in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend Luis Antonio Padiz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him. But the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly and the police will never come out on them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward, and Luis agreed. With the support of an accomplice, Felix called Keishla and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Keishla called her sister back and told her everything. She still had hope that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion. But Berylise all this situation is quite alarmed. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister, and she was worried that he wouldn't do anything to her. Berylise called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together they could not dissuade Keishla from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Keishla immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Keishla, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then Felix suddenly hit Keishla in the head with his fist, from which she immediately lost consciousness. Until Keishla regained consciousness, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Keishla. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car, where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Kishla's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Kishla, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Kishla's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Kishla has always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Berylise had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now Berylise was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Kishla. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, and then reported to the police about her suspicions and threats to her sister. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Kayla didn't even want to think about the fact that Kishla was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers, but they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel, messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks with requests to respond to those who know anything about her fate or current whereabouts. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things, blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Kishla's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Kishla, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Kishla's disappearance, he was at home with his family. As there was nothing to charge him, Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who at the first interrogation admitted that she was aware of his affair with Kishla, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Kishla was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car traveling behind each other. But the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge, and for which he had an official permit. Also, A cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Keishla were in the same location on that fateful night. Keishla's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law, as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery not in a traditional hearse, but in a white carriage, over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican natives, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures, have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased from the very beginning asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer, so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy and with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. It was possible to reconstruct the chain of events of that night and the details of the crime, mainly thanks to the testimony of Luis, who did not deny his guilt. He admitted that it was he who, at the request of a friend, got the drug for injection and also brought a wire and a concrete block to get rid of the body. But Felix continued to insist on his non-involvement in the case, although his words could not seriously affect the situation. By the way, the wife of the boxer, who acted in court as a witness, almost immediately after the arrest of her husband filed for divorce and tried to abstract from what was happening, focusing on the development of his business and raising a young daughter. According to some reports, not so long ago, Elisa Santiago remarried. Elisa herself admitted in an interview that she repeatedly received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, as well as death wishes to her and even Miranda. Many considered it was the spouse of the athlete as the organizer of the crime, but no evidence was found. In the summer of 2023, it became known that the jury, having familiarized itself with all the evidence and heard the testimony of all the witnesses, was finally ready to announce the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice Luis Cadiz were found guilty on each of the charges against them. But despite this, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023. Most likely, both men involved in the deaths of Keishla Rodriguez and her unborn child will likely go to prison for life, with no right to ever leave prison.